Armando Iannucci's latest comedy is HBO's space farce Avenue 5, in which passengers and crew aboard a garish spaceship are stranded in space. It's a hilarious show that people love for various reasons, and I'm here to talk to one of the contributors of that show, Eben Bolter, BSc. Eben, in the realm of possibilities, were you ever in a million years expecting that your credits would include a half-hour space satire by Armando Iannucci?
No, that's the simple answer. No. I tend to shoot. I tend to shoot single camera drama. Genre thrillers, horror, that kind of stuff. And yeah, comedy has never really been a thing. I watch an awful lot of comedy. I love comedy, but shooting comedy has sort of never been a desire, to be honest. I've always been a fan of Armando's work, completely separately to my job. Just absolutely love everything he's done. So yeah, when the phone call came, it did catch me a bit off guard. It's not the usual sort of thing that I'm sent by my agent. But as soon as it was Armando Iannucci in space, I had to read it, and then Armando and his team of writers are such good writers. The script was incredible. So yeah, it's not at all something I thought I would do, but when it came along, I couldn't say no.
Yeah. Can you explain for those of us who don't quite understand the difference? Because when I watch Avenue 5, it doesn't feel like a multicam show to me. It feels just like a regular cinematic drama. So how is this different to what you would normally shoot on other projects and other genres?
Well, thank you. I mean, that is the ultimate compliment. So thank you. That's perfect. Usually, when you've got one camera, when you're doing a drama, something like that, you really break down a scene shot by shot. You talk about the edit as much as anything. You talk about, we're going to start on this wide shot and we're going to push in nice and slowly. So you rehearse it and you lay the track and you push in nice and slowly. And you just do that one shot, and there's one monitor, one shot. You light it to make it perfect for that one shot. You get that one shot and you move on to the next shot. And now it's a close-up, or now it's whatever. And whatever that shot is, all of the attention goes onto that one shot. It's the performance of one actor. It's the lighting on that one actor's face. Everything, art department, play with the background to make it perfect. So there's always a kind of a precision to single camera that I do love. I love that kind of visual storytelling style. So when it comes to multi-camera, certain shows, you've got to have more cameras, basically. And in comedy is the classic where, ultimately the most important thing on something like Avenue 5 is performance. Is this funny? Is it funny? That's really the main thing. So when you've got this ensemble cast, you've got 6 or 7 characters in a scene, and they're playing with it. They're playing with the words. They're doing different things every take. They're literally standing in different positions. They're saying different lines, and they go off book and they start improvising. And if someone's being funny over here, and this person, we're not getting it, it's very hard to replicate that. It's very hard to come around and catch that other person and keep that sort of spontaneity. So yeah, you shoot it in a way where you can have 3 or 4 cameras covering as much as possible, so that every single take is almost a full scene. You've got all of the performances, you can see everything you need to see, and if there's a genius bit of improvisation, you've got not just the line, but the reaction to the line, and wherever it goes, it's covered. So the thing that I wanted to do on Avenue 5 when the job came to me was I didn't want to look at how multi-camera comedy should be shot. I didn't want to kind of, look at multi-camera comedies and think, how can I copy that? I just wanted to approach it the way I approach everything, as if it was a single camera drama, but see if I could also facilitate multi-camera shooting in that world. So it was very much my goal to make it look like a single camera show, to always try and have some intention to the shots, not just put 4 cameras anywhere, light it however, and just shoot. I always wanted to sort of try and treat it like, I was trying to do 4 single camera shots at once at all times. So that was difficult, but I did also think that if I did it my way, if I didn't look into how I should do it, how it's done, I'd at least come up with something. Even if I fail, I'll come up with something interesting because I've sort of tried to do it my way. So that was very much sort of the entry point, and just figure it out myself, and whether good or bad, it will be different.
That is fascinating. I actually really had no idea. Maybe I should have known that. But you're capturing like organic, authentic moments that are being kind of created as you are shooting, but you're doing it in a very specific way, predetermined way. Yeah, it's an amalgam of both. It's really interesting that you've done it that way, and it kind of works. Well, not kind of, it does work. The other thing that first occurred to me was, when we all know what cruise ships look like. They're kind of they're very clean lines. There's a lot of like gold, and it's a bit garish and it's a bit schmaltzy.
Yep.
With that look and feel, how did that inform the way you were going to shoot the scenes on the ship itself?
Yeah, so that's the other difficulty with this. So yes, white walls in cinematography are a difficult thing, because you're always looking for contrast. You're always looking for the person's face to stand out. And particularly if I'm doing multi-camera shooting, different people at different times, I'm not able, if I was doing a single camera show, I'd be able to darken the wall and do all kinds of lighting stuff, shot by shot, and make it easier. But I really had to light that entire spaceship set to be 360 shootable, so we can go anywhere at any time, point a camera at it, and it's going to look good. So there's a lot of things we did. I mean, the first thing to say, it was a ginormous set that they built, absolutely humongous, 250 feet by 150 feet by 100 feet high. In real terms, it's 3 stories, and you could walk around this thing for about 5 minutes before you repeat anything. So it's incredibly big, and we sort of realized that because we're in space, there's no weather. You haven't got nighttime or daytime to sort of tell you what time of day it is. So we realized that the ship itself would have to have lighting that kind of told the passengers what time of day it is. Because you look out the window, it's always, the abyss. So the pre-production was very how we tell the story of the time of day on the ship. So what does a morning look like on the ship? What does the afternoon look like? What does an evening dinner look like? What does the middle of the night look like? And how can I kind of use color, use lighting to tell that story in a sort of subtle way? And the advantage of the walls being white in that was that, them being white, they kind of capture a lot of the color that's shone on them. So in the middle of the night, we went for a kind of cool blue, almost moonlit feel from the lighting, and the walls kind of take on that color. So even though they're white, they kind of take on this kind of silvery blue. Whereas in the evening, we used a lot more orange light, and in the day, we had a kind of neutral, kind of warm light. So yeah, this is sort of say we did think a lot about how to tell the audience what time of day it is, give them some sort of geography to where they are. And the garish ship needed to have that kind of Trump casino feel. We wanted it to be luxurious, but a little bit, it's missed the mark, And also adding into that, we had 3 pallets on the show. We had the sort of front end of the ship, which is where all the passengers are. Then we've got the back of the ship, which is the sort of more service areas where passengers don't go. And in that, we could be a lot more grungy, a lot more, it's like an old kind of oil rig spaceship or something, a lot more kind of Ridley Scott Alien. And then we also go to Earth. So we've got Black Diamond Planet Earth, and we kind of created a separate look for that as well. So we had these kind of 3 zones, and in those 3 zones, we just tried to make sure there was always a sort of sense of kind of geography to where you are.
Yeah, I mean, you preempted what I was going to ask you, which is really about the 3. I noticed that immediately. I mean, obviously, the back of the ship is very grungy and dark, and you said that you've got a lot more use of color and shadow. The Earth stuff was really fascinating because we're looking at a future Earth, but it's kind of not that futuristic. And that mission control set was also really quite different. What in particular about the Earth scenes were you trying to achieve by making it feel like it was kind of like now, but it had a few touches of the futuristic in it?
Yeah, so Armando was sort of making the point that if you looked at, I mean, I live in London, England, and if you look at London in the 1980s versus London now, it actually hasn't changed that much. You know, there's still cars, there's still bicycles. People, like, you know, the kind of bricks and mortar of places don't change much. It's actually just the sort of small things, maybe the fashion, maybe the technology, that changes a lot. So Avenue 5, I think, was set 30 years in the future. And Armando wanted to kind of hint at things that have happened on Earth, but he didn't want it to be over the top in terms of it just looks like the future. He wanted it to feel very familiar, very normal, and there's the odd little flourish of something that's different and hopefully funny. So one of the things was he wanted to lean into global warming. So we wanted it to feel like whenever we're on Earth, it's incredibly hot. Simple as that. So there's always really bright sunlight coming through windows. We dressed sweat into the actors. There's just always a sense of the Earth is too hot. And that's just like a kind of subtle thing that no one ever really talks about, but it's there. And then there's other little things. I mean, like the White House has moved to, oh God, where is it? Buffalo, I think. That's never explained. It's just the White House is in Buffalo now. And it's clearly kind of, you know, gone downhill. And there's just little sort of subtle things that are there if you want them, you know? Really, we wanted to ground it in reality and just make it feel relatively normal and familiar. I think the one thing that I got sort of playful with was the mission control set, where I did use some sort of purple and blue color to just, I don't know, give it something. But, you know, when we go to the White House, we're just on location, light through windows, make it feel sweaty, relatively simple. Yeah.
Love that. You know, the show becomes so much more subversive and darker as we go along. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that the way in which you shot the show necessarily wasn't consistent, but was there any differences at all in terms of from the beginning of the show to the end and how you were shooting it?
Not really, no. Like if I'm doing a film, I tend to obsess about the visual arc of the film. That's one of the things I do, is I break down the script and I have references, I have a color board. The movie I just shot a Netflix film recently. I've got the whole movie laid out as a color strip. And I actually replace my references with real screen grabs as I shoot to make sure I'm kind of keeping to it. So color's a really important thing for me. In Avenue 5, because the show was so big, you know, we had 9 episodes. I was shooting for a 5-month period. And, you know, you can't really give something that big an arc unless there's like an event that happens that's massive and dramatic. And we've got lots of things that happen, but there's nothing crazy like the ship goes back to Earth and everything changes. You know, like there's not a real defining story point that gave me anything like that. So what it became for us was actually mostly about variety. It was about sort of, we've got our 3 rules for the areas of the ship, but we don't want the audience to feel bored. So a great thing in Avenue 5 is the ship is sort of so big that really you can just have infinite numbers of rooms. You can go, oh, there's a bowling alley we've never been to. Oh, there's a bar down there. Oh, there's a spa, whatever. So as new locations kept coming up, it actually became about color. It became about how do we sort of fill in our palette so that it's not kind of going on an arc. It's actually just exploring everything. So we instead of having this kind of story-led arc, we actually, the designer and I, Simon Bowles, we had a massive chart, and every new set, every new sort of lighting style I used, we'd sort of fill in the color palette. So we ended up with this sort of big image of all of our sets and all of our lighting setups. And we'd get to episode 8, let's say, and there's a new, and we'd look at that board and go, okay, we haven't done whatever it is. We haven't done green and yellow yet. Great. Well, let's work green and yellow into this set. And that's just kind of, it's giving us the fullest palette possible, and it's giving everything a sense of geography again. So yeah, I think we maybe got bolder as it went on, because like anything, you know, on a show, you sort of build confidence, I think, and as it goes along, it finds its identity as you shoot. And I think, yeah, about midway through the season, I think we really started to get it, you know, this is what's happening, these are the funny characters, these are the locations that are working, you know, this really worked, so let's do more of that. So I think we probably found our identity midway through, but yeah, nothing fundamentally changed.
It makes a lot of sense. On most shows, that it takes a few episodes to find your feed. in this show. You tell that by episode 4 or 5, it really congealed into something that really. My favourite parts of the season were episode 6, Incessant Beat, and episode 9, with the airlock. So appreciate for shit that we were dealing with around the world over the last few months. Do you have a favourite shot, favourite sequence that you were really proud of from as a DP?
Wow. No one's asked me that yet. Good question. Let me think. A favourite shot? No, I tell you. Okay, I'm hard pressed to think of an actual favourite shot. There's so many. But what I would say is that with all of the multi-camera, let me think. Yeah, there's a couple of things I'll say. So my favourite room that we lit, let's say, is Judd's conference room, Judd's office. That's the kind of, it looks like it's the inside of a tree, if you know what I mean. And that room, that was a room that I think basically the plan worked. I was able to light that entire room in a way where every shot in the multi-camera world felt cinematic and single camera. And I felt like that was a set that really, really worked photographically. But I'd also say the spacewalk stuff was always a big thing for us because it's a multi-camera comedy, but also we've got to do some spacewalks, and you can't do that as a multi-camera. That's so much VFX, and that's a whole other world. So I am sort of proud of how we approached the spacewalk stuff, which we approached it properly. I lit that pretty much with one light, which was the sun. I had a massive sun. We had, Hugh Laurie or whoever's doing the spacewalk in a real spacesuit up on wires, and we lit it, the way I would have lit it if it was a movie. We tried to be as truthful as possible to what's going on in space, which is there's one really big light really far away, and that's it. It's a vacuum of black everywhere else. So I'm quite proud of how we did the spacewalk stuff. I think for a comedy series, it was okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised it because it reminds me of how varied the work that you were doing on the show was. It wasn't this one note thing. You're doing quite a lot for a comedy that's really rare. My final question is more a general one. I always ask this when I speak to DPs. I love the art cinematography, and I was wondering if you could walk us through what are your influences in your work in terms of other cinematographers, and what are some examples of cinematography that you think are the best of your particular field?
Yeah, good question again. Great work around at the moment that inspires me.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Funnily enough, I did something similar earlier today. There's two I'd say very quickly. Christopher Doyle is a cinematographer who works for Wong Kar-wai. They did a lot of films in Hong Kong in the early 2000s, late 90s, and his work is so unbelievably poetic. It's just pure visual poetry. In the Mood for Love, Chungking Express. There's so many other films. Any of their films, you put them on. You could even put them on mute, and there's so much storytelling in every single frame. And that had such a big influence on me because what I realized is Christopher Doyle was using not much stuff. He was using a camera and some lamps, and that's it. And to me, when I was starting out, that felt possible. Something. I love the biggest and best of cinematography. I love Lawrence of Arabia, Steven Spielberg, whatever. But that felt impossible. That felt so far away. That felt like huge crews and all this equipment and this kind of impossibility. Whereas with Christopher Doyle, I felt like there's a world where I could approach doing something like that, where I could pick up a camera, put some lamps in the right positions, and maybe do something similar. So I think Christopher Doyle is always in the back of my mind, as big as things get, as big as Avenue 5 was for me. In the back of my mind, there's always this sort of principle of, you don't just have to use all these expensive toys because you have them. Just only turn the lights on if you need it. Otherwise, sometimes all you need is a desk lamp and a camera, and that's enough. So I think that's a really big thing. And the only other thing I'd say in terms of work around at the moment is I think Marcel Rev's work on Euphoria season 1 of Euphoria, I thought was just visually breathtaking. It's unbelievable. I can't believe what he pulled off on a TV schedule and budget for Euphoria. I thought it was incredible. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. Because Chris Medora is one of the greatest Australian cinematographers ever. We've got a lot of he works in Hong Kong. And Avenue 5 as well. Mate, I am really impressed with Avenue 5. I was not expecting a show with so much to offer in terms of its artistry. And we thank you very much for your time today, and congrats on a great first season.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Now, everybody go to goldderby.com and make your predictions and click subscribe. We have plenty of contender chats just like this one with Eben.